A very warm welcome to all of us who have gathered for this event, this seminar on the humanitarian crisis in Gaza and Palestine. और मैं कहना चाहती हूँ कि मैं आज की जो कार्रवाई है वो नज़र करती हूँ गज़ा के मकीनों के नाम. I want to dedicate this session and the few words I will speak to the valiant people of Gaza. We can ask the question about the reason for this humanitarian crisis. And the reason is the carnage which the Israeli Defense Forces have perpetrated on the unarmed people of Gaza. I'm not now talking about Hamas. You know, it has become a civilizational issue. It has become a civilizational issue. It is an attempt to wipe out the history and the culture of the Palestinians. 39,000 people have been killed, many of them women and children. But the number keeps increasing. And the amazing aspect of this war is the utter impunity with which the Israelis function. The impunity with the support of the veto of the United States of America. Nothing deters them. Not the ruling of the International Court of Justice that there should be no genocide in Gaza, not the resolutions of the General Assembly of the United Nations, not even the vote in the Security Council, which the United States vetoed, but the other members supported. So they have functioned with complete impunity. And the result is that they have wiped out the culture and civilization of that region. They have killed school children. They have demolished schools, colleges, universities, museums, mosques, institutions of higher learning, anything that is linked to culture. They have done away, they have struck at poets and writers and authors, professors, teachers, artists. They have struck them all off from life. And how long this carnage will last is anyone's guess. Although we hear that some attempts are being made to secure a ceasefire, a 40-day ceasefire before Ramadan. But it may not materialize because the Israelis don't really have any respect for the religious feelings of the Palestinians. And there is a genuine fear that there may be some kind of conflict around the Al-Aqsa Mosque during the period of Ramadan. But what they have not gained through the capitals of the world, and it is surprising that the countries which have stood by them and recalled their ambassadors belong to Africa and Latin America, and not to the Arab world, not to the Muslim world. Many countries in South America have struck off diplomatic relations with Israel. But we don't see that in other parts of the world. But what they have not gained through diplomatic efforts of the Western nations, the European Union or the United States of America or Canada or their allies, they have won in the streets of the world. In every country, more or less every country, thousands and thousands of people have walked in solidarity with the people of Gaza and with the Palestinian cause. And the chant that from river to the sea, Palestine will be free, has become a kind of universal anthem. Also, we see this solidarity with Gaza, we see it on the campuses of the world. In the more conservative, pro-Israeli campuses, there is a kind of punishment for those who support. But by and large, the streets have stood by the people of Palestine. There have also been individual acts of heroism, like that serving United States airman, I've forgotten his name, who set himself on fire. Diplomats, I remember one case, a diplomat from the Netherlands who resigned in protest. And you know there's always George Galloway, who when he was elected, the first thing he said, "This is for Gaza." It is a kind of cruelty which one has not heard of or witnessed before. I was telling my colleagues that even Genghis Khan would have been more compassionate than these people who are trying to flatten out the civilization, the culture, the history of the Palestinians. You know, they know that they have to die. They realize that they will die, that they will be killed. And so let me tell you what they say in their own words. The last words of the feminist poet Hiba Abu Nada from Gaza was, "Before God, we in Gaza are either martyrs or witnesses to liberation, and we all wait to learn where we will fall. We are all waiting to fall. O God, your vow is true." She died along with her family in Khan Yunis in Gaza, which she described as a state of mass slaughter and senseless assassination of everything. It is a piece of land which is deprived of everything, of food, water, medicines, oxygen, transport, fuel, in which you see little children whose arms and legs have been amputated. And there are hundreds of orphans who have lost both parents and they don't know where to go. They look under the rubble for scraps of food to eat. And the entire region, the entire area is on the verge of famine, as the United Nations and the health organizations of the world have pointed out. One of the images I saw were of Harvard University, where the students were lying on the steps of the university and they were chanting the poem of one of the greatest poets of Gaza, Rifat al-Hariri. He was a poet, an academic, an activist, and he was killed in an airstrike along with his family in northern Gaza. And I will conclude by reading out his poem, which has become very famous now, although he had written it many years ago. If I must die, let it be a tale. If I must die, you must live to tell my story, to sell my things, to buy a piece of cloth and some strings, make it white with a long tail. He's referring to his coffin. So that a child, while looking heaven in the eye, awaiting his dad who left in a blaze, and bid no one farewell, not even to his flesh, not even to himself, sees the kite, my kite, you made flying up above, and thinks for a moment an angel is there, bringing back love. If I must die, let it bring hope, let it be a tale. To discuss this humanitarian crisis in Gaza, we have three distinguished speakers, and it is my pleasure to introduce the first speaker, who has traveled all the way from Islamabad to be with us. He is Mr. Oves Anwar, who is the director of a very famous firm, RSIL, located in Islamabad. He is the director of the Research Society of International Law, and he is a very famous legal expert. He was educated in the School of Oriental and African Studies in the University of London, and he has also studied in Vienna, in Austria, in the University of Vienna Law School. He has worked with various legal institutions. He has also taught law, and he has lectured on law in many institutions in our country. He has lectured to bureaucratic institutions like the National Defense University, also a university that's not a bureaucracy. And he has worked with advocates and legal consultants in many capacities. And he is going to speak on what will he speak? He will speak on the humanitarian and international law aspects of this tragedy. Mr. Oves.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Dr. Masuma Hasan. I'm also grateful to Dr. Tanveer Khalid and Mr. Amir Rifat, who's been very kind and very hospitable during my stay here. Let me begin by thanking you all for attending, and certainly the Institute for having me here and listening to an Islamabadi. So I'm grateful to all of you for that. I'm also, very respectful of the idea that there is a level of fatigue that is set in with regards to Gaza. We simply can't see these images that are all over social media, that are all over Twitter and every other platform that we see. It's psychologically numbing, and I'm certainly hoping that Sana will be able to give us a better understanding of the mental health consequences that are happening there. The role I want to play today is very briefly give you an outline overview of the humanitarian crisis that we're currently seeing as of today, and then also try to introduce you to some of the international law aspects that we need to understand to be able to really give meaning to what is happening, what these atrocities are. They're done in a particular context. There is a particular set of law that applies there, a specialized set of law that applies there. And the violations of that law is how we criticize and critique the actions of the Israeli Defense Forces. So could I get the next slide, please? Could you perhaps... So the current humanitarian situation, I'm sure most of you know this. That's fine. Gaza is home to 2.3 million Palestinians. Almost 31,000 have been killed, have been martyred within this, and there are 72,500 injured. If we put these numbers together, that is 1 out of every 25 Gazans has been either killed or injured in this conflict. In addition to this, about 75% of the entire population of Gaza has been displaced. 3/4 has been displaced after the attacks. What we also see here is, a lot of the, how should we put this, the 1.5 million people that have been rammed into a tiny portion of Rafah. That's currently what's happening. And the reason we're begging, literally, the word for a ceasefire is that Israel's next move is to, this is the last bastion of any protected, of any protection, really. Israel's already started its attacks on this area. And just to give you an idea, the population density of Rafah is 22,200 people per square kilometer. Rafah is a total area of about 64 square kilometers, which is double, I was just doing the math, I was looking at DHA here in Karachi, double the size of DHA. And you have 1.5 million people, really just pushed into there. That's more than double the size, the population density of New York City, and it's about almost as high as Dhaka. And Dhaka, Bangladesh, many of us have heard that it's one of the most densely populated cities in the world. So that's what we're actually looking at. Every bomb will have multiple casualties. Every action taken by the Israelis will have massive casualties, simply because of the numbers that are involved here. Another startling fact is that 175,000 buildings, including every single institution of higher learning, has been destroyed. That is 61% of the built structures of Gaza has been destroyed. I don't think we can properly fathom that. Right? 61% is a massive number. This is what decimation, although the historical term decimation is not what the modern word is, but this is utter devastation on a scale we haven't really seen. These numbers, the number of dead, are what the Russians have been accused of over a period of 2 years. Israel did this in 3 to 4 months. Next slide, please. Sorry, this is the next slide. You have preempted me here. Thank you. The other concept that I wanted to look at was occupation. Occupation, we hear, especially Pakistanis, we hear it in the context Maqbooza Kashmir, occupied Kashmir, but it has a very specific legal context. An occupation is territory which is held by the opposing force or another country to which it does not have sovereign title to. All right, so it doesn't have any lawful excuse to be there, and it's taken over that territory. That's what a basic definition of an occupation is. After the acceptance and the global acceptance of the UN Charter in 1945, acquisition of territory through conquest, through military attack or something like that is simply not possible anymore. You have a blanket prohibition on the use of force or the threat of use of force in Article 2.4 of the UN Charter. And this is perhaps, the biggest strength, in my opinion, of the UN Charter is this Article 2.4, where, in essence, outlaws violations of a state's sovereignty, of its territorial integrity. So, यहाँ पे आप नहीं खड़े हो सकते. I can't see. Thank you very much. Therefore, any territory occupied after 1945 cannot become part of another state, right? And if it does become part of another state, we call it an annexation. So occupied territory, by definition, is always, the occupation is temporary. It has to be given back. We have recognized opinions, not simply of Oves, Sana Pirzada, who is biased because he's a Muslim or he's, supporting the Palestinian cause. You have opinions of the International Court of Justice. You have opinions of the Israeli High Court, which say that the territory that the West Bank, Gaza, is occupied territory. Right? So that's clear cut. There's simply no. Every attempted settlement within this territory is a form of annexation, which is unlawful by definition. International law does not recognize this. What we had during the Trump administration was something known as the Pompeo Doctrine, where they decided to make up international law of their own accord and say that we do not recognize the Israeli settlements in the West Bank to be illegal per se. Now, this was, frankly speaking, a farce that they did. And one of the positives that we've seen, very few, unfortunately, one of the positives is that the Biden administration has revoked this. This was just done a week or two ago. A week or a little, perhaps longer than that. A month ago, they've revoked this recognition that the settlements are lawful. So that's a big move. The U.S. has categorically now said that these settlements are unlawful there. And when you have an occupation, something that is prolonged for this long, you have a number of UN General Assembly resolutions which also reflect customary international law, as well as statements by UN's UN special rapporteurs on the issue of Gaza, which state that there exists a right to resist. And this isn't a right to peacefully protest. A right to resist means armed struggle. And if you don't want to take my word for it, let's look at UN Resolution 3743 of 1982. Paragraph 1 reaffirms the legitimacy of the struggle of peoples for independence, territorial integrity, national unity, and liberation from colonial and foreign domination and foreign occupation by all available means, including armed struggle. So this, allergic reaction we now have, especially after 9/11, that any armed struggle, oh my God, must be terrorism. We need to get this out of our system. Back in 1982, this was not the case. And we need to reaffirm that freedom struggles are not cases of terrorism. And we'll get to that. In the next operative paragraph, they specifically mention the Palestinian people, that this right of armed struggle is to be given to the Palestinian people. Let's, if we also look at Richard Falk, who's a UN Special Rapporteur on Palestinian human rights, he says, Israel's failure to abide by international law as a belligerent occupant, as an occupying power, amounted to a fundamental denial of the right of self-determination and more generally of respect for the framework of belligerent occupation, giving rise to a Palestinian right of resistance. So what we see here is that the UN Special Rapporteur is also recognizing this right. What Israel has done has tried to utilize the legal atmosphere that the US bulldozed after 9/11 onto the world and try to use any form of armed struggle to call it terrorism. And that is how Hamas has been labeled as a terrorist organization by all of Israel's allies. And that's something that needs to be kept in mind. Okay? Yeah. Before moving forward, I just want to discuss the point of misinformation. The law can only be applied to facts. Okay, that's, if you go to court, most of the quibbling is on facts, right? This is our version of facts, this is our evidence to prove it. That is your version of facts, and you can have evidence. And then a judge decides, or a jury decides, what are exactly issues of fact. And it is only to such issues of fact that the law can be applied. What we've seen from day one, from October 7th to this day, is a state policy of misinformation or disinformation coming out from Israel. Things that have been routinely, roundly proven to be false by Western media organizations and by the Israelis' own admission as well. So things like babies were beheaded, or that the Nova rave that was taking place, there were some 260 people killed. We now know that there were Apache helicopters that were used in those attacks, where the Israelis used those helicopters to shoot on their own people. They mentioned that there have been charred bodies found. The Hamas fighters, whatever you want to call them, you want to call them terrorists in this thing, they did not go in with things that could cause charring of bodies. It was the tanks that were firing shells into the houses with complete disregard for their own citizens that led to a lot of these things. There was massive issues of sexual violence were alleged. Very brutal testimony that pregnant women's wombs were ripped open, babies were thrown out. There were women who were raped left, right, and center, then shot in the head during the act. Things like that were made up. The New York Times had to withdraw articles that mentioned this because there's a UN report that just came out 2 days ago, and they say that there's credible evidence of sexual violence. One thing in the footnotes, if you'll note, they did not speak to a single victim of sexual violence or witness. Yet they're willing to make this claim. Whereas on the other side, we have multiple witnesses, hundreds of witnesses alleging sexual violence against Palestinians, and yet that same has not been given any real, weightage there. So that's something that we need to understand, that misinformation is there for two purposes. One, so that you really can't apply the law properly, right? You can't say whether it's a genocide. We need to investigate it. We need to do other things. And secondly, to create to win the game in the court of public opinion. That if you can show the people how evil and cruel Hamas is, that might justify us in destroying them and decimating the city there. The second issue that I want to go to is how Israel targets Hamas or anyone really on the ground in Gaza. Israel uses international law and says that we abide by international law. So there's a principle that I want to go to, and that's called proportionality under international law, under international humanitarian law, IHL. International humanitarian law is the law of war, the law of armed conflict, and it says that an attack is lawful where you have to do a balancing act. So imagine this is a tank, right? Now a tank, by destroying it, I gain a certain military advantage, right? Because it can attack my forces, it can kill my soldiers. So taking it out gives me a military advantage. But I see that next to it are several civilians. There's a civilian house with 10 members in it. Now, as a commander who is allowed to attack this, I have to weigh whether the anticipated benefit of destroying this tank outweighs the potential civilian harm, the anticipated civilian harm that could take place there. And if I feel that this would be excessive, that the civilian harm would be excessive, I cannot attack the tank or any other target like that. So this balancing act, and there's a very basic formula that I put up there. So the anticipated military advantage has to be greater than the civilian casualties. What Israel does here is that it plays around with this equation. And you can see yourself, anyone who's done any bit of math, is that you can simply change the weightage attached. The anticipated military advantage could suddenly, you say, oh, destroying a cache of 3 AK-47s is hugely beneficial to us. Even though, frankly speaking, 3 AK-47s aren't such a big target. Or taking out a low-level Hamas commander or low-level foot soldier is enough for us to destroy an entire civilian apartment building. So they've changed the weightage there. What they could also say is that civilian casualties, they give a lower weightage to. That we will, and we've seen this in the Jabalia attack, this was a refugee camp, for one Hamas commander, they're willing to kill over 100 Palestinians. And so the US, at the height of its attacks here and there around the world, had put a ratio of 1 to 25 or 1 to 15. And in some cases in Afghanistan, right at the end, they had 1 to 0. So you could not do any attacks in which you thought that even one civilian would die. The ratio that Israel seems to be applying here is 1 to 100 or more, where they're willing to, for one individual target, they're willing to kill 100 civilians. That is the difference in there. So we have to be very clear on that front. I hope I have another 2-3 minutes. All right. Just to, what we also see is that, unlike other countries, Israel interprets international humanitarian law differently. So, for example, there'll be a civilian building, and if in that building there's one room which is being used by a sniper to attack targets, the rest of the world will say you can destroy that one room, but try to protect the building. Or you can use certain weaponry which would eliminate the terrorists there. You could have shaped charges, you could have a particular drone strike or low-yield missile strike. You could use those things. Whereas Israel says that even if there is one apartment there, we're allowed to decimate or destroy the entire building. This is how they interpret international humanitarian law. And so that is something that is highly problematic from our end. The other last few points that I wanted to make was the entire spectrum of negotiations that we see, all the pressure that the world is putting on Israel is not for them to do something magnanimous and to really go out of their way. It is simply to abide by the basic tenets of international law. Stop starving people. You can't do that. That violates international humanitarian law. Stop killing babies. Try to impose some limitations on how you conduct attacks. These are all basic things that any civilized nation in the world would be required to do in any case. The other problem we see, and especially from Pakistan's perspective, is the export of the Israeli playbook. What Israel has been doing for the past several decades, really, in Gaza, is now what we see happening in Kashmir. We are going to be seeing these highly secure residential areas developing for the return of the Hindu Pandits into Kashmir. We are going to be seeing a lot more Israel-style retribution and violence against people who may be alleged to be freedom fighters. So we've seen already freedom fighters, their bodies are not returned. This is exactly what Israel does. It's happening in Kashmir. Israel demolishes the homes of family members of freedom fighters, right? We see this happening in Kashmir again. And not just in Kashmir, we've seen Muslim homes being demolished elsewhere. The bulldozer has become a symbol of Hindu nationalist pride, the Hindutva regime there. And that's something that is certainly concerning, in our neck of the woods. And finally, I'll simply, to give some hope, some silver lining within this, is that international law seems to have been a spectacular failure. And, I'll be the first to agree with you. Somebody who has, devoted his career to international law, international law hasn't been able to save one child yet. It hasn't been able to prevent attacks on hospitals. It hasn't been able to do this. But the only thing, I think, the only silver lining that we see here is that international law gives us the language of critique. It is only through concepts such as genocide, crimes against humanity, war crimes, that we can actually, categorize and identify what Israel is doing, and then critique it based on that. And so I think even if it is simply the words that we have, international law plays an important role there. Perhaps in the question answers, we can discuss the case that has been brought by South Africa, as well as the investigation that is being run by the prosecutor through the International Criminal Court, and anything else that you'd like to discuss. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Oves. The next speaker is Sana Pirzada. Sana is a member of our institute. She is a lawyer, she is a barrister, and she is also a human rights defender. And she is a legal consultant, offering advisory services on family laws, criminal justice issues, workplace harassment, gender-related laws, mental health laws, corporate matters, and employment laws. She is the founder of Virtual Legal Advisory, and she has worked with many law firms in many capacities. Sana has studied in the United Kingdom. She has also lectured to many institutions, both in Pakistan and abroad. She has worked, as I said, with many legal firms. She is a health specialist so far as human rights are concerned. She studied at the London School of Economics and Political Science at King's College London, and she became a barrister through Gray's Inn, the Honourable Society, sorry, not Gray's Inn, Lincoln's Inn, Honourable Society of Lincoln's Inn. Sana will speak on the psychological impact of the war on the people of Gaza.
Assalamu alaikum everybody, and thank you so much for being here. I'd like to start by expressing my profoundest gratitude to Dr. Masuma, who I personally find an extraordinary professional and extraordinary woman. I'd also like to thank the team at the Pakistan Institute of International Affairs for giving me this honor. Dr. Masuma, thank you for that introduction. I'd also like to start by saying that apart from being a lawyer, I'm a writer. And the reason why I mentioned this at this juncture is that as a writer, when I write about characters or I write about settings, I have to imagine that particular era, or I have to imagine a particular tragedy and then write about it. I put myself in someone else's shoes and imagine what pain they are going through. This is what I'd like to talk to you today about the people of Gaza. When I was preparing this presentation on the psychological impact of the people, I literally put myself in that situation, which technically speaking, one cannot do. If you close your eyes for a few moments and if you try and imagine yourself there, and if you try and imagine what's happening there, I think you'll open your eyes and you'll wish you didn't imagine it at all. I'd also like to say that at the very start, I'm giving you a trigger warning because this presentation contains some disturbing images, but the whole point is until and unless we do not see these images, we cannot comprehend the struggle of what the people over there are going through. I'd like to also start by saying that when it comes to mental illnesses, those are scars that cannot be seen. And many a times, those scars that are invisible can be a lot more painful than something that's physical. Death is lamentable. Absolutely, there's no doubt about that. But it brings your pain to an end. With a mental illness, it's something that you have to live with for the rest of your life, which is what the people of Gaza have been doing for decades. This is just to put the entire theme into context, and I'm not going to go through these statistics because my learned friend over here very beautifully explained everything and the dire situation in Gaza. But suffice it to say that this is from February, and obviously in the last week or so, again, these figures may have definitely gone up, and it is a catastrophe, an unspeakable catastrophe. If you could move on, please. Now, this is actually what I want you to focus on, and I want you to imagine this. In my own personal capacity or my professional capacity as a lawyer, I wrote a letter to the chief prosecutor at the International Criminal Court because a few months ago he was asking everybody to send evidence, and he required evidence to prosecute Netanyahu and his team. And I admit I'm a nobody, and I admit that they already have an ample amount of evidence. There's nothing that I or anybody else can say that would make a difference. But I nevertheless went ahead and wrote something and sent it to him because I thought, as a human being, it was my moral obligation to do so. And I said to him in that letter, I said, you and I have never been in a war zone. We have never seen buildings blowing around us. We do not know what the sound of bombs is like. We do not know what it feels like to wake up in a hospital to find our loved ones lying dead before us. We do not really know what it's like to see the sight of dead children. We wouldn't know how to fathom that, how to digest that. We cannot imagine our own house, the place where we grew up, the schools that we went to, the masjid or the churches or other places that we've been going to, blown to smithereens. We can't imagine that. And if you do close your eyes for a moment and imagine all of that, how would you feel? And if you have to live with something like this for the rest of your lives, how is it going to impact you? I'd like to just share a few statistics over here, and I'd like to say that the World Bank in 2022 found that more than half of the adult population in Gaza had screened positive for depression. A smaller number showed signs of post-traumatic stress disorder, and of course this isn't due to a one-off event. As we all know, this has been happening in Gaza for a period of several decades. Before the war, more than 500,000 children required mental health and psychosocial support. Now, unfortunately, it has risen to over 1 million, as per UNICEF. What's more painful, and I'm going to say this even though it's breaking my heart, half of the children in Gaza have contemplated suicide, with 3 in 5 self-harming. And on the previous slide, and I apologize, I should have actually highlighted that, It specifically mentioned that children as young as 5 have said that they would rather die than live. I've got nieces and nephews. My youngest niece is 7, and I'm sure all of us have either children or nieces and nephews. And to imagine that the smallest children in a society want to kill themselves because of what's happening around them is horrible. It's something that I don't think that we can live with. Again, so when we talk about the different sorts of mental illnesses that people are going through in Gaza, as I already mentioned, post-traumatic stress disorder, and I have to say that post-traumatic stress disorder is a massive trauma. It is a massive mental illness, and this is what war veterans go through. You blame yourself for many things that are happening around you. You feel guilty that you could not help the next person, perhaps even your parent who's lying dead beside you. And again, this is something that you have to live with for the rest of your life. Obsessive compulsive disorders. I've read accounts of people who've said that they get up in the middle of the night because of nightmares. They have to lock their doors several times. They have to shut their windows only because they feel that something is about to happen. Someone is about to barge in, or a bomb is about to blow off. Needless to mention things like anxiety and depression, which I've already mentioned. Insomnia. I mean, how can you sleep? The smallest thing that happens to us keeps us awake at night. Imagine being in a war-torn zone where at any moment in time you can be bombed. How can you sleep? And insomnia is obviously a massive problem, which leads to other problems as well for your diet and your entire emotional well-being. Kids have nightmares of soldiers ransacking their homes, and obviously other kinds of problems that children have experienced are bedwetting and constant paranoias of something happening to them. 10,000 children have been killed. These blasts have led to amputations, and according to the United Nations, nearly 335,000 children under 5 are at high risk of severe malnutrition. Incubators have been shut down. Children have lost limbs and therefore their mobility. And somebody who has lost their limbs, somebody who is no longer capable of walking properly, doesn't have a hand, or worse, doesn't have an eye, or whatever, imagine the trauma that they will live with for the rest of their lives. This is what I said ab initio, that death is lamentable without a doubt. But when you're dead, your pain comes to an end. But if you have to live with something without a body part, it's probably the most horrible feeling that no one can imagine. Again, just to emphasize the impact on children, and we keep going on about this because, as my learned friend also said, that a vast majority of the impact, apart from the adult population, is on the children of Gaza, and they're going through hell in these circumstances. UNICEF has said that the Gaza Strip is the most dangerous place in the world to be a child. Al Jazeera, according to Al Jazeera, most of the ambitions, now most of the children that Al Jazeera journalists have actually spoken to have said that when they grow up, they would like to be engineers. Why? Was your father an engineer? No. Because we'd like to rebuild Gaza. What else would you like to be? We'd like to be a doctor. Why? Is it a noble profession? No. Because we'd like to help people. Because I lost my father, I lost my mother, I lost my sister in front of my eyes. And I wish that I was a doctor and I could help them. And to imagine a little child saying something like that, to feel something like that, again, it's a horrible feeling, because when we were children, we wanted to be lawyers, doctors, writers, for happy reasons. We were probably inspired by Hollywood movies. They're inspired by the hell that they're living in. According to Save the Children, 86% of Palestinian children in Israeli detention are beaten whilst in custody. There are also many cases of sexual violence. And again, you can well imagine being detained and how that impacts you psychologically. And I don't even want to discuss the sexual violence claims, because that is extremely heartbreaking. And Save the Children have said that 80% of children in Gaza are mentally distressed. I apologize for showing you this image, but this has been on the news. It's been on social media, and it shows detainees being stripped by Israeli soldiers. And it is reminiscent to a large extent of what happened in Nazi Germany. And we could not imagine that in this century, in 2024, we would be seeing this before our very own eyes. And we would be so handicapped that we would not be able to do anything about this. And now imagine the psychological trauma that these people have gone through, or their family members who would see them in this position through these footages. Again, it's abhorrent. This is an extremely painful episode, and I'll just talk briefly about this. This is the tragedy of a child called Hind Rajab. She was a 6-year-old child. She was with her family in a car which was surrounded by Israeli tanks, and they started bombing them. Her cousin phoned the paramedics. There is a very long recording, which you may have heard if you've heard the news, in which she pleads for her life, and she asks for the paramedics to come, the ambulance to come and to rescue them. And the most painful thing, as I say this, is that she's almost weeping, and the paramedic is asking questions in Arabic, and suddenly you hear the Israeli tanks bombing, and you hear this girl screaming. And a few moments later, and I'm sorry, I'm becoming a little emotional just saying this, there is absolute silence. There is deafening silence, and all you can hear is the paramedic echoing the words, hello, hello, and then there's nothing else there. So if this is happening to children, imagine what everybody else would be going through listening to this, knowing that this is probably the fate that could befall their own children in Gaza. It is very painful. The paramedics couldn't make it, by the way, in time because of a number of different problems, and this entire family, including this child, were killed by the Israeli shelling. There are several mental health facilities in Gaza, and they do say that they're doing a sufficient amount of work, although personally I really doubt it. If the hospitals are being bombed, I really don't know how anybody could go and consult a psychiatrist and talk about their problems. Having said that, the Gaza Community Mental Health Program is in existence. You've got the Gaza Mental Health Foundation, and UNICEF also have different family centers. And they're trying their utmost in these communities to entertain kids by playing games, to keep people busy. They're also offering psychological first aid, which is, you don't have to be a qualified psychiatrist. It could just be you or me helping each other because we share the same trauma. But this is the ground reality. I've just included this, and I think that it's, you probably can't read it, it's a little blurred, but the reason being is that apart from writing to the International Criminal Court, I wrote a letter to David Cameron, the UK foreign minister, and I did so when they stopped funding UNRWA, the United Nations institution that looks after Palestine, because there were allegations that some of the members of UNRWA were part of Hamas, and this was out of thousands of the workforce. There were just allegations against a few, and there were calls to pleading the United Kingdom and the United States not to do this, because this UNRWA is one of the sole institutions that looks after the people of Palestine. And again, in my own capacity, I wrote to David Cameron pleading and urging as a human being to not do this. And then I received a standard response saying that they were considering the allegations of Hamas very seriously, and that they were providing other sorts of support to Palestine. Again, the reason why I've shown this letter is, sorry, if you could just move on to the last slide. I personally feel that in our own capacities, you don't have to be a lawyer, whomsoever you are, it is our moral obligation to stand up and to say things when you see that something evil is happening around you, and especially to your own fellow brethren. I'm not just focusing on this issue because they are Muslims. Had they been Christians, had they been Hindus or whomsoever, it would have made no difference to me. They are human beings and they are suffering, and if they are suffering, I'm suffering as well. And I'd like to conclude by saying that despite the fact that this was very painful for me and for everybody else as well, the people of Gaza have shown a tremendous amount of resilience as well. They have, as I mentioned, adopted community-based coping strategies, and you do see that there might still be some hope, and I hope and pray, inshallah, that there is. On our parts, I would say that we must keep advocating for mental health services in Gaza in our own capacities, which means reach out to organizations within and beyond Pakistan. Please write to organizations, especially the United Nations organizations. They're there. You can find their email addresses online. Write to them. Please do that. The more pressure we all put on these different institutions, hopefully, inshallah, good things are likely to happen to these innocent people of Gaza. And I'd like to end with a quote by Nelson Mandela, and obviously Nelson Mandela has proven to be a real role model because of what South Africa has done for Gaza, and which is what Dr. Masuma had rightly said at the very start, that this is something that Islamic countries should have done, but South Africa did so. And Nelson Mandela emphasized, we know too well our freedom is incomplete without the freedom of the Palestinians. This is something that he believed in, that his country has shown. This is something that we all must believe in, and we must play our own parts in helping the people of Gaza. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sana. I must add that Sana is also a novelist. She has written 3 novels, which have all been published in the United Kingdom. And the next speaker is also a member of the Institute. It is Mr. Shahrukh Shahnawaz. He is also a member of our council. He is a lawyer who has been, he is a practicing lawyer who has also served as civil judge and judicial magistrate in Karachi. He has worked with different law firms. He is currently enrolled in a PhD program at the School of Law in the University of Karachi. And he is a prolific writer. He has written on many legal issues. He is also published in our journal, Pakistan Horizon. And his work has appeared in many other publications, in many newspapers, and many other journals. And Shahrukh is going to speak on the international community's role in resolving the Palestine conflict.
I am highly grateful to Madam Dr. Masuma Hasan and Madam Dr. Tanveer Khalid and to the Pakistan Institute of International Affairs and this, for giving me this opportunity to be able to speak in presence of such an esteemed panel of speakers. The birth of the modern international community was seen after the end of the Second World War, with the creation of the United Nations in 1945, along with the beginning of the Palestine conflict in 1948. The UN started with 51 members, which later increased to 193 members due to decolonization and thereafter the disintegration of the Soviet Union. It is estimated that between 1945 and 1960, around 36 new states in Asia and Africa emerged on the world map after being freed from the control of their European colonial masters. This allowed the former colonies to raise a collective voice against their former colonial masters, although it is often blocked by the use of veto by the permanent members of the UN Security Council. The partition of Palestine and the creation of Israel was done through the Resolution 181 in 1947, passed by the United Nations General Assembly by 33 members, voting in favor of the resolution while 10 abstained and 13 rejected it, including Pakistan. And though it would seem that international community favored their former colonial masters, in the case of Palestine, the truth was that the difference was of only 10 votes, which would soon change drastically after the inclusion of new members, which would form the majority of the United Nations General Assembly and emerge as a strong voice. This is evident from the fact that the Union of South Africa under apartheid regime voted in favor of Israel, but now the post-apartheid regime South Africa has brought the case of genocide of Palestinians before the International Court of Justice. The United Nations General Assembly Resolution 194 of 1949 led to the establishment of the Conciliation Commission of Palestine to help the parties reach a final settlement while reaffirming the rights of Palestinian refugees to return and restitution. In the aftermath of the mass displacement and dispossession of Palestinians during the 1948 Palestine War, which is also called Nakba or the catastrophe, it thereby recognized the violent displacement and dispossession of Palestinians and the destruction of their society, culture, identity, political rights, and national aspirations. This aspect is crucial in understanding the arguments favoring the ongoing case of genocide of Palestinian people before the International Court of Justice. Even the Amnesty International has raised concerns about forced evictions and home demolitions in a discriminatory system, stating that it amounts to committing apartheid against Palestinians in the occupied Palestinian territories and Israel. The UN Relief and Work Agency for Palestine Refugees in the Near East, or UNRWA, was established by the United Nations General Assembly in the same year, which supports the relief and human development of Palestinian refugees, with the mandate that encompasses Palestinians who fled or were expelled during the Nakba and the 1948 Palestine War, and subsequent conflicts, as well as their descendants, including legally adopted children. It is important to note here that the 1951 Refugee Convention only dealt with the developments in Europe during the Second World War. More specifically, when thousands of Jewish refugees and other European communities who faced persecution during the Second World War were denied safe passage to other countries and forced to return to Nazi Germany only to be executed. The 1951 Refugee Convention set basic principle recognizing the right of any individual in any part of the globe to obtain asylum. Due to the international community's endeavors, the 1967 Protocol was incorporated, which broadened the applicability of the 1951 Refugee Convention by removing the geographical and time limits. However, the same principles which were recognized to prevent the future Holocaust are now being violated by Israel to destroy Palestinian people. Article 1D of the 1951 Refugee Convention singles out individuals who receive aid from the UN agencies and specifically applies to UNRWA. And while it was introduced to afford Palestinian refugees heightened protections, national courts of various countries have often interpreted this clause to deprive Palestinian refugees from these protections. This is even an ongoing issue of dismantling UNRWA, which will prove disastrous and have long-lasting fatal consequences. But there is a hope that the international community will not allow this to happen. To truly and legally understand persecution of the Palestinian people, it is very important to collectively read the Genocide Convention adopted by the United Nations General Assembly in 1948, the 1951 Refugee Convention and its 1967 Protocol, and the Apartheid Convention adopted by the United Nations General Assembly in 1973. These three instruments were the result of the collective efforts of the international community, and more specifically the former colonies, even though the Apartheid Convention was voted against by the United States and the United Kingdom. After prosecuting Nazi officials at the Nuremberg for committing international crimes during the Second World War, there was this idea for a permanent international court to prosecute international crimes. However, with the passage of time, this demand was opposed by the developed nations, especially the United States, and favored ad hoc tribunals, as seen in the case of Bosnia and Rwanda, instead of a permanent court which will behave more like a police over states. However, the International Criminal Court became a reality due to the support of the international community, especially the African nations. The international community also played an instrumental role in the recognition of the Palestine cause. In 1974, the Palestine Liberation Organization, or PLO, was recognized as the sole representative of Palestinians at the Second Islamic Summit of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation in Lahore, Pakistan. Thereafter, the PLO was admitted to full membership in the Arab League in 1976. And after the Oslo Accords in 1993, Israel recognized the PLO as the legitimate representative of the Palestinian people, but always objected whenever Palestinian National Authority tried to bring the matter before any international forum or tribunal, on the ground that it lacked the official status of a state. In Palestinian Cairo Declaration of 2005, 12 Palestinian factions, including Hamas, declared PLO as the sole legitimate representative of the Palestinian people. Thereafter, in 2012, the United Nations General Assembly Resolution 67/19 of 4th December 2012 decided to accord the Palestinian non-member observer state status, thereby enabling the Palestinian Authority to approach the International Criminal Court and International Court of Justice. On this occasion, the Palestinian Authority Foreign Minister Riyad al-Maliki said that we are humbled by this historic support. Thereafter, in 2015, the Palestine formally joined the International Criminal Court and could now bring war crime charges against Israel. Even Hamas in 2021 welcomed International Criminal Court's decision to investigate Israeli occupation war crimes. International Court of Justice issued its advisory opinion on 9 July 2004. Officially, it is the legal consequences of the construction of a wall in the occupied Palestinian territory, commonly known as the Israeli Wall Advisory Opinion. In it, the International Court of Justice has referred to the West Bank, including East Jerusalem, as the occupied Palestinian territory, and used this term as the legal definition in its advisory opinion of July 2004. The legal consequences arising from the policies and practices of Israel in the occupied Palestinian territory, including East Jerusalem, is a request for advisory opinion from the ICJ, International Court of Justice, as a result of the United Nations General Assembly resolution in 2022. Its public hearing initiated on 19 February 2024 with participation by 52 states and 3 international organizations, which is a historic and direct participation seen by the international community for the Palestinian people. South Africa approached the International Court of Justice on 29 December 2023, formally known as the application of the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide in Gaza Strip, also called the South Africa versus Israel. The International Court of Justice has ordered Israel to take action to prevent acts of genocide in Gaza and provide humanitarian aid to Palestinians, though it did not call for an immediate ceasefire and Israel to immediately stop its military campaign. It can be argued that International Court of Justice cannot direct a state for a ceasefire because this falls within the scope and ambit of the United Nations Security Council. However, in the past, International Court of Justice has on numerous occasions given findings on the issue of ceasefire, and the same could have been applied here. The International Court of Justice, in a dispute between Mali and Burkina Faso in 1983 regarding the delimitation of the part of the land frontier between these two states and on the application of the principle of Iuta Possidetis Juris, which prohibits the states emerging from decolonization from changing the colonial international borders, ordered the parties to continue to observe their ceasefire, to withdraw their forces behind agreed lines, and to ensure that no action was taken that might aggravate or extend the dispute that have been submitted to the chamber of the court. Similarly, on the issue of ceasefire, in 2013, the International Court of Justice, Judge Peter Tomka, said in the verdict that under the 1962 decision, Cambodia had sovereignty over the whole territory of the promontory of PIIA, and that Thailand was under legal obligation to withdraw its security forces from the area. It is similar to Palestine conflict, as Temple of PIIA is a place of pilgrimage and worship for Cambodians. Another example is of the International Court of Justice appraisal of the Lusaka ceasefire agreement in the case of armed activities on territory of the Congo or Democratic Republic of Congo versus Uganda. Usually, a ceasefire agreement as such does not change the legal situation, at least as long as the occupying power remains in control. But according to the International Court of Justice, the Lusaka agreement is more than a mere ceasefire agreement, in that it lays down various principles which cover both the domestic situation within the Democratic Republic of Congo and its relation with its neighbors. In the case brought by South Africa before the International Court of Justice, main 5 genocidal acts have been highlighted that Israel is accused of committing against Palestinian peoples. First, mass killing of Palestinians. Second, bodily and mental harm. Third, forced displacement and food blockade. Fourth, destruction of the healthcare system. And finally, preventing Palestinian births. It could have also included the right and protection of Gaza fishermen, who usually suffer due to Israel's blockade. There is no doubt that during the hearing of this case, constant reference will be made to the application of the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide, or Gambia versus Myanmar, also known as the Rohingya genocide case, which is another remarkable feat on part of the international community, and in which the International Court of Justice has tried to hold the government of Myanmar answerable for the atrocities being committed against the Rohingya Muslims. More recently, on 1st March 2024, Nicaragua approached the International Court of Justice against Germany for being complicit in the genocide of Palestinians and for funding Israel and cutting the aid to UNRWA. International Criminal Court has been investigating the crimes committed on 7th October 2023 in the present conflict, and even going back to 2014 by extending its jurisdiction. If there is no intervention from the United Nations Security Council, there can be a possible prosecution of the international crimes by the International Criminal Court. In March 2024, a group of Canadian lawyers have decided to sue Canada's Global Affairs Ministry for exporting military goods and technology to Israel during the Gaza conflict, arguing that the exports could be used in alleged human rights violation against Palestinians. The US so far has vetoed 3 resolutions in the United Nations Security Council calling for the ceasefire, raising the question of complicity in committing murder if not genocide. Such a use of veto has always hampered the efforts of the international community, but has failed to deter it from taking a definitive stance against their former colonial masters. Following the 2021 Palestinian crisis, the UN Human Rights Council voted on 27 May 2021 to set up a permanent UN fact-finding mission to investigate possible war crimes and other abuses committed in Israel and occupied Palestinian territories. On 20th October 2022, the Commission released a report to the United Nations General Assembly calling on the United Nations Security Council to end Israel's permanent occupation and on individual UN member states to prosecute Israeli officials. The report found reasonable grounds to conclude that the occupation is now unlawful under international law due to permanence and Israel's de facto annexation policies. The Commission requested for International Court of Justice advisory opinion declaring the occupation illegal. The support of the Palestine cause can also be seen by various regions and regional organizations. The European Union is the biggest provider for external assistance to the Palestinians. In 2023, the European Commission provided over 118 million euros to the Palestinian Authority. In March 2024, the European Union's Humanitarian Commissioner visited UNRWA camp in Ramallah after its funding was restored. On 7th March 2024, Association for Southeast Asian Nation or ASEAN and Australia called for Gaza ceasefire and supported UNRWA for providing aid and protection to Palestinian refugees. In November 2023, the African Union criticized Israel's military attacks on Gaza and called for stronger efforts for diplomatic solution to the Palestine conflict. Latin America has supported the Palestine cause and condemned the violence. Latin America's pink tide, a term used to describe the resurgence of left-wing government in Latin America, has taken a stance against Israel. Leftist leaders like Colombia's Gustavo Petro and Chile's Gabriel Boric have condemned Israel violence in Gaza. The Arab countries have not gone beyond the verbal criticism of the ongoing situation, but at least in a world dominated by alliances and interests, the humanitarian crisis is being recognized, which if not a final end, does provide an opportunity to take the first step towards holding the perpetrators accountable. In December 2023, United Nations General Assembly demanded ceasefire in Gaza, and though not binding, the symbolic resolution was passed with 153 votes in favor, 10 against, and 23 abstentions, showing how far the international community has come since the days of the Resolution 181. Thus, through United Nations General Assembly, International Court of Justice, International Criminal Court, and organizations like Amnesty International and Doctors Without Borders, the international community has played an instrumental role for not letting the Palestinian people down and keeping their cause alive. Although the colonial mentality continues to obstruct the functioning of the UN, and the international community has not stopped resisting it. I would now like to conclude my presentation, and once again, I am highly grateful to Madam Dr. Masuma Hasan, this prestigious institute, the distinguished panel of speakers, and a wonderful audience for providing me with this opportunity. Thank you.
Some time left, so I open this discussion to the floor. Is there any questions to our learned speakers? Yes. Inko mic ko.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you for this wonderful presentations, everyone. Well, my question is to Oves that you mentioned about the Kashmir conflict as well. And you know, since I'm a 90s kid, and in the TV, what we have, grown up watching is Lag or Angarwadi. In these dramas, we have shown that how freedom fighters, how Pakistan has been supporting the freedom fighters. And then we saw the Kargil war in 1999, and suddenly everyone become the terrorist. And then we see the Ukraine conflict as well, where we are seeing the Wagner group, and they have they're not only fighting in Ukraine, they're also fighting in Africa. So I wonder what is stopping OIC, or, what we have to do. We are doing something wrong, definitely. So what is that, how to revive those UN resolutions that you mentioned, that freedom fighting is not a terrorism. So that is a very disturbing thing when I see this crisis and there's no end to it. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the question. Firstly, it's good to see a familiar face in the audience. What we see with regards to Kashmir, and especially, it's really the 9/11 effect, right? The 9/11 effect has, when the US wanted to double down on fighting terrorism, they used such a broad tool to do it that all, freedom struggles, and that they were so bloodthirsty in their approach, and they were so single-minded in their ways, that they didn't leave any room for opposition in the entire world. Everyone agreed, yes, the US has been struck, they're really angry, they're going to take, there needs to be some blood that is let, some spilling of blood to satisfy this juggernaut that is the US at this moment, right? So this is right after 9/11. And so the world agreed on 1267, 1373, these resolutions, which essentially, said that you can't harbor terrorists, you can't do anything. But they never came to a definition of terrorism, right? We still don't have a definition of terrorism globally. But every country has their own definition. And for the US, what they did was that they didn't need an international definition. What they did was they created a list. So anyone who was on that list was a terrorist. And they added some 100 plus Pakistanis or people who were in Pakistan on that list, right? So they created essentially a vague definition of terrorism, included whoever they wanted. The Indians were their friends, so they'll put Kashmiri freedom fighters on that list. हमारे ऊपर एक दो दफ़ा बड़ा एहसान किया, they put a few Afghan terrorists on it. Time and again we've gone to them and said that there are Indians who deserve to be on this list. They've said no, we won't listen to it. Okay, it's an arbitrary thing. There's no evidence that is required to be on the list. It is only intelligence that you can submit. If they accept it, fine. If they don't, the issue is that we need to push back now. The days of 9/11 are over. There is a new realization that is coming about. I think this particular context specifically, that fear that we had that we can't say anything about these issues, that we need to break out of that. We need to start saying that freedom struggles are freedom struggles, and that you cannot simply label them and take them away. What is also happening at the same time is that there is the the exposing of Western hypocrisy, where in the situation of Ukraine, you can have foreign fighters come in and fight for Ukraine, but if a single person was to show up from any other country to fight for Palestine, though they have a UN recognized right to fight, right, they would be considered terrorists, they would be, blacklisted, they'd, be prosecuted. So I think people are seeing through this now, and enough is enough. That, I think, is the perspective that a lot of the global south especially is having. What you're also witnessing, and I'm sorry I'm taking so long, the last point is, what you're also witnessing before your eyes is the death pangs of a global power, frankly speaking. I think this is the US star is waning, the West is, their economies have stagnated, they're unable. We're looking at the next 30, 40 years where these economies might become irrelevant, right? European economy, because we're seeing Southeast Asia, we're seeing India, we're seeing China, inshallah Pakistan as well, right? Where that's where the economic hub is going to be. And people are only going to go to the West for, say, tourism now, right? Because nobody else is going to care about going to Europe for anything else. They can't manufacture, they do it too expensive, right? A lot of the ideas are now coming from China and from the rest of the world. So what you're witnessing right now is the death pangs of a new world, and crazy things start to happen in such times, right? When you have this rivalry happening, when you see one power winning and another rising, strange things will happen all around the world, and I think this hypocrisy is one symptom of that.
Yes, thank you. Is this a very simplistic way of, describing or explaining what we have witnessed since 9/11, or is there a much larger agenda at play? And are we a bit too hasty in writing off and saying that death pangs of a country? I don't think that in our lifetime we're going to see any demise of any of these Western powers, especially when might becomes, the weaponry, the kind of weaponry that is evolving, and it's not going to be tanks and airplanes and these kind of weaponry, but the kind of weaponry that is evolving is beyond our imagination even at this moment. So how can we say that this is going to happen or is in the process of happening? And to the point that Pakistan was labeled after the 9/11, not a single person in the whole scheme of 9/11 was a Pakistani citizen. So I am amazed all the time, every time 9/11 is mentioned, how did Pakistan, and therefore I feel that there is a larger agenda at play, and I'm not looking for an answer in that particular context, but that I'm looking for an answer about how the big powers are evolving, the so-called powers of yesteryears, and in the context of the new powers emerging, whether they will be able to stand up to the technological warfare regime that is evolving. Thank you.
So, Madam, I just want to take a minute to respond. When two friends are being chased by a bear, you don't have to outrun the bear, you have to outrun your friend, right? So when we talk about the demise of a superpower, nobody's saying that you are suddenly going to see an apocalyptic, post-apocalyptic world in which, the Americans become savages and start eating each other. That's not what's going to happen, right? They're just going to become second best. And second best is enough for the shift in how international law is understood, how it's created, how it's done. Once China takes over, or if we see this, right? If you see this different body, which is able to dictate through whether it's funding of the IMF that we see, whether it is funding of the UN that we see, the UN Security Council, the ICJ, the ICC, all of these bodies, once they start relying on something else, you're going to see a very different form. And that's what I'm saying. I certainly fully agree with you. It is too simplistic to assume that suddenly, once they we see them go down, they're going to just implode. I don't think that's going to be the issue there.
Uwais Saab, I have a question for you. I'm a practicing lawyer based in Karachi. Of course, Israel's response is disproportionate. Everyone is criticizing Israel, every conscientious soul in this world, be it Muslim, Jewish, Christian, they are criticizing Israel. They have, in fact, crossed that red line and, you know, they have killed 31,000 plus innocent civilians. And, you know, if I'm not wrong, you talked about ICJ judgment, Ms. Pirzada. Even on the bench, there were 2 or 3 Israeli judges who, in fact, ruled against Israel. Their opinion goes against Israel, if I'm not wrong. Here comes my question. Don't you think that what Hamas did on 7th October under international law is not legitimate? That's not acceptable. We are not just Muslims, we are not just Pakistanis, we are also global citizens. We have to condemn that. And last one. Don't you think that we cannot afford to do this in this day and age? This is my question to you. As an international law expert, and Ms. Sana can also answer this, both of you.
Thank you for this. I'm just going to briefly answer that question. And I actually should have said that at the very start, that I most definitely do condemn what Hamas did. As a human being, I will never defend anybody who murders an innocent person, whether you're a man, especially women and children. And there is evidence that women were killed, young women were killed at that concert that was happening. I've seen photographs as well. My learned friend had spoken about allegations of sexual violence as well, which remain disputed, so I'm not going to go down that road. But having said that, I completely do condemn what Hamas did, and I would never defend anybody who murders innocent people.
Allow me to respond, and then we can all clap together. I fully agree with you. I mean, I take the sentiments of what Sana has said. We simply cannot, you know, have a discussion on this without condemning what is wrong, right? And whether it's IDF doing it or Hamas doing it. But let's give the same benefit of the doubt that we give the IDF, that they demand and they label you anti-Semitic if you say anything. Let's give the same examination and afford the same opportunity to Hamas. All right? And what do I mean there? Let's simply examine their actions as opposed to the Piers Morgan approach. Before talking to you, do you condemn Hamas? I do condemn Hamas. I condemn all their actions which are in violation of international law. I do not condemn their right to resist. Every attack on an Israeli soldier is legitimate under international law because they are targets. So the initial attacks that took place on those bases are completely legitimate. And the same stands for Kashmiri freedom fighters when they attack bases in Kashmir. Let's be clear. If there were rapes that took place, if there was sexual violence that took place, the hostages that were picked up, I understand the reasoning that Hamas has. There are thousands in Israeli prisons who have been detained and military court trials have taken place and they've given life sentences based on zero evidence. We know what military court trials are, right? We're familiar with it in this country. So let's be clear on this. Let's give the same, afford the same opportunity to Hamas that Israel demands for its forces. And then when you say, then criticize them for killing civilians, for killing, you know, the many numerous women who are part of the Nova rave elsewhere in the country, but do not criticize them for what they do not deserve. And that is standing up and resisting. That is a right given to them by the General Assembly, by multiple statements, and that is the position of the state of Pakistan as well. Right? So let's be clear on that front. Thank you very much. Absolutely, that's I showed the UN resolution that mentioned that. The right of the right of self-determination that we keep on espousing for the people of Kashmir. There is clear evidence for the people of Palestine, right? On that, they have a right of self-determination. Right of self-determination includes armed struggle, right? Killing of civilians, anything done against civilians was wrong. Killing a single civilian is wrong. Absolutely, unequivocally. The taking of hostages, I condemn. If there's allegations of sexual violence, investigate those. If they're there, that is something that I condemn. The killing of civilians, I condemn. But let's be clear, the things I don't condemn are the attacks on their military forces. And I think there were some 300-400 military casualties. So a third of the attacks are
My name is Zafar Shafiq. I'm a member of this institute. My question is to Sana Pirzada. This is a long and cumulative history of trauma. A study conducted by the World Bank found that more than half of the adult Palestinian population were screened positive for depression, including 71% of Palestinians in the Gaza Strip and 58% in the Israeli-occupied West Bank. With the post-traumatic stress and the distressed children still wishing to rebuild Gaza, would you like to compare this resilient behavior as against the post-traumatic negative behavior?
So your question is basically that there are two sides. On the one hand, the Gazans have shown resilience, and then on the other hand, there is post-traumatic stress disorder. See, the thing with mental illnesses is that it's very hard to confine it to a box. And we're dealing with a population of, say, 2 million or so. We see this resilience as something superficial. Do we really know what's happening in the minds of these people? You know, sometimes to cope with what you're going through, you try and distract yourself by doing something else. It doesn't mean that the pain you're going through emotionally and mentally has gone. And it doesn't mean that later on in life it won't come back to haunt you. So to answer your question, when it comes to the scars of a mental illness, it varies from person to person. Some people are very strong-headed. There have been people over a period of time, we've seen stories from the First World War, Second World War as well, that people have actually emerged and they have emerged from their phases of mental illness as well. It's possible that this may happen with some of the people of Gaza, but it seems unlikely given the magnitude of harm that is befalling them. But we can only hope and pray that they do emerge from this. I hope that I've answered at least a bit of your question. I'm not a qualified psychiatrist, so I can't comment much, but from a layperson's perspective, that's all I can say. Thank you.
Sir, my question to all panelists. I would like to say that you have been condemning the Hamas. Hamas is the elected body of the Palestinians first. Second, October 7, how you qualify that they were responsible actually for the provocation of Israel to attack the rest of the Gaza Strip and destroy them completely. So what is the evidence? This is the language you have spoken, all three of you, is the language of the international imperialists who have been actually are trying to usurp the right of the people and the Palestinians. And believe me, I tell you, the three veto which was in Security Council by the United States of America, I think this is not justified. It's not completely not justified. Now see the Trump, what he issued a statement. He said that if I would have been the president of United States, I would have completely wiped out the Gaza Strip. So please try to understand, for the last 75 years, the Palestinians are suffering, and they have been suffering so much. Even have you gone through the writing of the Qudratullah Shahab when he went to East Jerusalem? Because you speak the language of the international imperialists, because you are I don't say that you are paid, but you try to support them, and you support those people actually who have been day and night. Read the column of Mr. Arif Hasan today in Dawn. You will. I request you, please withdraw your words calling Hamas as that he is responsible for the provocation of the Israeli attack on the Palestinian and Gaza Strip.
अच्छा बात ये है कि Trump has also said that if he had just a minute, Trump has also said that if he was president, this war would never have taken place. This is what he has also said. You've made your point. Does anybody want to answer and say that they are not imperialists?
Sir, in my presentation, I have not discussed about terrorism or Hamas to begin with. But secondly, that whether Hamas has committed aggression or it is a terrorist or it is a terrorism organization, it depends upon the definition. Again, as I have mentioned in my presentation, in the 2004 opinion of the International Court of Justice, it has declared Palestine and East Jerusalem as occupied territory. So if you are relying on that opinion, that makes Hamas an armed resistance. But if you are relying on the issue of Palestinians or PLO even, because PLO doesn't recognize Hamas, and that is not the case entirely, because till the 2006 elections and the unity government, they were together. Hamas even recognized PLO. I have mentioned it in the Cairo Declaration. But after that, Hamas committed atrocities and war crimes against the Palestinians. They have prosecuted the Palestinians belonging to PLO, and they have executed them without giving them fair trial. So killing of civilians in either case, whether you are a terrorist or an armed resistance, cannot be justified. Cannot be justified. PLO, I am saying PLO. The Palestinians were killed by Hamas. After the 2006 unity government broke down, there is this entire chapter of Battle of Gaza, in which the PLO Palestinian Muslims were killed by Hamas, and you cannot ignore them. I am saying PLO, that they are Muslims. They are Muslims. So against the Muslims, it is an act of terrorism. As far as Jews goes, as far as Israel goes, the picture for you is black and white. But when it comes to PLO itself, then the things become a bit of a grey. Second point. Only the second point. As far as election goes, yes, Hamas did won election and PLO refused to hand over the power to Hamas. You are absolutely right. But as far as international recognition goes, besides Hezbollah and Iran, there is no one else which recognizes Hamas as a representative of the Palestinian people. That is the problem. And third point, I have not used the language of imperialism or imperialistic people. My entire paper was on this point, that now the voice of international community has become strong enough to resist the colonial masters. The voice which is dominating United Nations Security Council. But the hundreds of resolutions which are being passed by the United Nations General Assembly every year, you cannot simply ignore them just by saying that these organizations are colonial organizations. I can also ask you one question, that in 1993 Oslo Accord. I am.
Don't go into the details. You have called our respected speaker an imperialist. He wants to. He wants to. It's the same thing.
So allow me to defend my good name, if you will. So I think there's been a bit of a misunderstanding here. I think the approach that I've a feature of imperialist tendencies. The United Nations has its leanings here and there, and that much of this is more political than it is legal, right? Having said that, I think nowhere in my statement have I called Hamas a terrorist group. Nowhere have I, in fact, if anything, I'm the one who's stating that some of the attacks that they did were legitimate rights of resistance and that they can completely vote. But we have to be fair. What is wrong, right? If there is sexual violence, regardless of who does it, that is wrong. There is simply, you cannot use that as a tool of war, right? Heretofore, I have not come across evidence that Hamas did it, but we do have a lot of evidence that Israel has done this, right? Another thing, killing civilians. I mean, whatever school of thought you belong to, whether it's Muslim school of thought, Islamic rules of war, whether it is Buddhist rules of war or secular international humanitarian law, you cannot justify the killing of civilians. Unless they take up arms and they become direct participants in hostilities, DPH, that's another concept. Unless they're DPHing, they're directly participating in hostilities, you cannot kill civilians. And the exact same thing that we're criticizing Israel for this massacre of civilians that is taking place on a daily basis, we will have to be honest and fair and credible. We'll also have to point the finger to Hamas if they've done something wrong. Otherwise, we lose our credibility. We look like fundamentalist, you're just trying to push a view. Thank you, and the round of applause, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay. I want to shed light on the narrative that is being built after 7th October, worldwide and in many conference rooms. So when we ask, do you condemn Hamas? Or when we ask, do you condemn Hamas actions on 7th October? There is a difference. Because we never ask, do you condemn Israel? We always, in all the conference rooms and worldwide, we are asking, do you condemn Israel's genocide in Gaza? We don't say, do you condemn Israel? So I leave it there to reflect on that, because when we say, do you condemn Hamas, we're asking, because what is Hamas? Anyways, I will leave it there. The question is that Israel has started bombing Yemen, South Lebanon, and Iran as well. There have been threats. So the attacks are spreading like wildfire in the region of Middle East. And if that escalates, will it lead to a domino trigger of international war? Because Middle East is a very important region in global trade, and China is building a BRI. So obviously, if Israel and USA has control over the Middle Eastern region, it will be sabotaging interests of China and of course Russia, if it creates a monopoly on global trade, especially through the controversial Ben Gurion Canal. So yeah.
See, so there was a lot in that question, and I fully understand your position. Do you condemn Hamas or do you condemn Israel? Why don't we ask that question? We have to realize there is clearly an asymmetry in this relationship. And the narrative that is being framed has always been a narrative that is framed through the lens of CNN, BBC, Sky News, which are all Western. If we look at some of the best reporting that I've seen on this, it has been from Al Jazeera. It is one of the few media outlets that are presenting a voice that is frankly fair and balanced, in my opinion. The issue is that we have to again build that credibility to be able to do that. Being a state that is recognized like Israel gives it many, many advantages. And being a group that Israel has convinced the Western world to condemn as a terrorist organization puts it in a very weak position. So that asymmetry is there. Anything they say is emanating from a terrorist organization. That's the position that they've done. And what we're trying to argue is that you cannot simply call an organization that has been elected by the majority of the people of Gaza. And frankly, if you had elections today in the West Bank, you would probably see Hamas winning there as well. That's how much their support has surged. You cannot call them a terrorist organization simply for resisting. Now, you can resist in a right way or you can resist in a wrong way. That doesn't mean that simply because you've killed a few civilians, you lose that right of resistance, right? So that right of resistance is there and you cannot label it as terrorism. The issue is that it's also the media war and the narrative that you rightly framed. Any criticism of Israel has been conflated, deliberately so, with anti-Semitism. And anti-Semitism will cancel you regardless of where you are, right? And it's something that, really does need to be done. Anti-Semitism is what allowed Hitler to do what he did, right? But now we don't see the same type of, when it's Islamophobia, anything goes. You can have a US senator says, I want all the Palestinians to be killed. And he said this, right? At the same time, you say one word which shows any animosity towards the Zionist, which is a particular ideology. It is not Judaism in any way. In fact, if anything, it goes against the tenets of Judaism. You are labeled anti-Semitic. You are cancelled. You're taken off the airs. You lose your advertising if you're doing a show. So it's really, the outsiders who are generating the criticism, which is now coming into the mainstream. And so it's again, the asymmetry, all of this combined, the strength behind this label of anti-Semitism is what discourages you from asking the question, do you condemn Israel? That's from my perspective.
आप पूछना चाहते हैं the last question, आखिरी सवाल.
do you think that these are the death pangs of the state of Israel itself? Because will it be able to come out of it in the form of the Israel that we knew existed before October 7th? Because it's right now, just because of what Yemen has done, their economy is down at least 20%. That's a conservative estimate. America, despite all the technology that they claim to have, they cannot do anything against Yemen. Just today there was an attack on an American destroyer in the Gulf of Aden, Yemen, targeted it with like 37 drones, and also struck a US ship today. So what is going to happen with Israel? There is a war with Lebanon. Iraqi militia is attacking Haifa port. Yesterday there were missiles lobbed at the Haifa port in Israel. So it is facing a 3 or 4 phase war, which is escalating, it's not coming down. And it may escalate out of hand in Ramadan because of this Al-Aqsa blockade. So what do you think is going to happen?
Thank you for your question. With respect to Yemen, I can start by saying that Saudi Arabia has already committed so much war crimes with respect to Yemen. And there is so much plunder going on into the entire region. It is not only just Israel. When we talk about Kurd, when we talk about Yemen, we have Saudi Arabia, we have Turkey. All the countries have very poor human rights record. So as far as the law with respect to human rights record goes, the law is clear, and they are big, powerful countries with big militaries, and it can be very difficult to hold them accountable. As far as Israel goes, how will it end, or what is going to be the end of this entire situation? Well, there are 3 aspects. There are 3 things that you can keep in mind. First of all, that Netanyahu was not popular within the politics of Israel as well. So it can be argued, or it can be speculated, that this was done to make him popular. It can be argued. And then there is this entire change into this entire region. Now Saudi Arabia, Iran are coming on one page. So Hamas and Houthi, these were the only elements left which were resisting these big countries. So it is possible that in this new Middle East, in which the Saudi Arabia is open and liberal, and Qatar has this diplomatic relationship with Iran, and Iran has diplomatic relationship with Saudi Arabia, there is no place for Hamas. There might not be a place for Houthis, and these all decisions are being made by these big, strong countries with big militaries who think that these big economic opportunities will benefit them. Either you go towards China, who is introducing this road or belt initiative, or you go towards America or the West, which is trying to make the Israel acceptable and recognized by all the Middle Eastern countries. In either case, the scenario is changing, and we have to point out, as far as political goes, we have to point out the interest of all these countries. But as far as human rights law goes, or the humanitarian law goes, that law is very much clear. Gambia called out Myanmar to ICJ to hold it for committing genocide against Rohingya Muslims. South Africa has called out Israel for committing genocide against Palestinians. Any other African country or Latin American country can call out all these countries, starting from Pakistan all the way to Saudi Arabia or Syria. Because all the human rights violations and the laws which have developed so far with respect to them is very much clear. And all these countries need to be prepared to answer for their atrocities which they have committed. Because tomorrow they can end up before International Court of Justice as well.
Well, this has been a wonderful session, and I will now wrap it up. I want to thank the speakers, but also refer to some of the issues which were raised. In the first place, we say that Hamas has the right to resist. How can it resist without attacking? How can it resist? The people of that area have been have had to live under atrocious conditions for decades. How are they supposed to resist? I don't understand. We use the word, yes, you can resist, but you can't kill civilians. Then what do you do? And from what I have gathered and read, Hamas has prepared for this attack for a long time. They didn't do it overnight. It wasn't that one day the head of Hamas decided that he is going to launch this attack. No, they prepared for it. They have been preparing for all kinds of resistance for a long time. They have dug miles and miles of tunnels underground. Some of those tunnels may even be as far as Israel, we don't know, but there are miles and miles of tunnels which the Israelis are trying to neutralize as they move towards further occupation of Gaza. Secondly, as one of the speakers mentioned, that the hypocrisy of the West has been exposed. Yes. Not only is it that the United States of America has vetoed all the ceasefire resolutions, it has come out with ridiculous reasons for vetoing also. But it has claimed that there should be no war, and at the same time, during the war, it has sent military hardware to Israel, and it has funded Israel financially also. So we can see this dichotomy in their approach. Now, the United States of America, with the help of Jordan, has decided to drop 38,500 meals in Gaza. Too little, too late. When those people are on the verge of famine, you are dropping these meals. And these Gazans, lately there was an incident in which they tried to access food that had come through the Rafah border. And while they were accessing that food, the Israelis just decided to gun them down. And the Israelis, while the war is going on, have also drawn up a plan to make 2,600 or 26,000, I think, settlements in the West Bank. So all this is happening simultaneously. And the hypocrisy of some of the Western countries knows no bounds. When we look at this entire scenario, we see that it is those nations which have been victims of colonialism who have risen in support of Gaza. And I would refer you especially to the wonderful debate that took place in the Parliament of Ireland. As you know, Ireland was a victim of British colonialism for many centuries. And they have suffered a great deal, and they also put up a very strong resistance, but they also killed. So I don't really understand how you can say that, yes, you have the right to dissent, you have the right to resist, but don't kill anybody, especially when you are being killed yourself all the time. These are issues which, for which maybe there are no easy answers. Because of what has happened in Gaza, and look at the cruelty of it. One day they say to the population, move north. Then they say move south. As if they're not human beings. They're just cattle. You move them north. All right, you are north, now you come south. So you come to south. And what happens to you on the way is nobody's business. And further, what has happened, what has come up front, is the international community's support for Gaza has led to the demand that Palestine should become a permanent member of the United Nations. So far, it only has observer status, but there has been a move that they should become a permanent member of the UN, and I hope that that will happen. Thank you very much I want to thank the three speakers for their really excellent and well-researched presentations, and thank you for being such a wonderful audience. There is a table over there where some books are available for free. Anybody who wants a book can just pick it up and take it home. And please join us for a cup of tea downstairs.